Welcome to the Skeptic's Guide to Investing with Steve Davenport and Clem Miller. Every 2 weeks, Steve and Clem bring you brief investment insights you may not find anywhere else. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Here are Steve and Clem.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Skeptic's Guide to Investing. We're here on November 5th after the elections last night and the mayor's race in New York and the governor's race in New Jersey and Virginia. And I'd say it was kind of a sweep for the Democrats. I think they are probably in those areas very hard to see somebody really doing something different. So I'm not sure if it's victory or if it's just kind of life goes on, as a saying. Today's topic is capitalism. Are we redefining it, or is it declining? And I think that we've seen so many things in the last 6 months, 9 months, 12 months that all make you think that we're living in a different world now. And the capitalist city in the world, the center of markets, New York City, has decided on a socialist born in Uganda who wants to give free buses and universal care and set up grocery stores in the 5 boroughs. So today we've got Frazer with us from Wealth Actually. And Frazer has been a guest with us before, and he does a tremendous job of looking out for what's happening in the world of wealth management. And being in the heart of New York, I thought it would be great to have his opinion on some of these issues. So Frazer, tell me, is capitalism dying, or is it in such a great place now that the markets are high that it doesn't matter who the mayor is? He's not a factor.
Well, it's sort of a tough question in the sense that these things all get sort of adjudicated in the rearview mirror once we've had some sort of perspective on it. But just some thoughts on Mamdani and his election. I haven't been able to totally troll through the data, but I think a couple of things to take for granted or take in mind here. Number one, huge turnout and overwhelming response from young people, male and female, as far as being pro-Mamdani, which tells me that, especially amongst college-educated types, et cetera, that his message of affordability and being able to access the things that are great in the city resonated. He did not have to make a statement vis-a-vis how he would pay for certain things, and as a result, I think under the sort of guise of someone who's charismatic and attractive, et cetera, made for a very popular candidate, both at the primary and at the general election. I think Cuomo. I think we can all agree that one name in the Democratic national circles is now, I think, officially dead. I think the Cuomo brand is over. And Curtis Sliwa was not, it's just an oddity and sort of an interesting political candidate in a extremely weak Republican setting. And so it was Mamdani's to take. And having gotten through the ranked choice voting gauntlet to become the nominee, it was just a matter of time. I think that as far as his relationship to the business community, that is to be defined. And I think he's trying to say some of the right things. I think now that he's elected, he can probably ease off the base a little bit and have a bit more of a conciliatory tone, especially behind closed doors. I think the most important thing, the thing that I'm watching the most, is how he deals with the police commissioner hire, because Jessica Tisch is, I think, well regarded from the police perspective. I think from the highly moneyed perspective, she's one of them. And if he's able to keep her on, I think he gets at least a year or two of leeway in terms of crime. And I think that's one thing that people really focus on as far as New York's effectiveness in the capitalist environment. I think across the river to New Jersey, I think seeing a Democrat win the governorship there, I think that signals that whatever we thought the gains might have been from Trump in his election are peculiar to him and him alone, and not necessarily a marker or a sea change as far as electoral politics in the Northeast and New York in particular. And then, I think as far as, sort of wealthy people saying, "Oh my God, he's gonna raise taxes and so on." I don't see that happening. Certainly this year, because Governor Hochul needs to be reelected, or try to get reelected in 2026. I very much doubt she's going to be in a hurry to raise taxes on New York City, a place that she does not come from. She's Buffalo based, and so as a result, I think anything sort of revolving around that happens well after 2026 and 2027, 28, and that's where I would sort of focus my lens on it. The fact of the matter is also that New York City and frankly New York State runs as the financial services industrial complex runs. A gigantic fraction of the tax revenue comes directly from that, and it's no surprise that I think Connecticut and New Jersey and other surrounding states are licking their chops as far as being able to soak up some of the financial services firms. And then if you start thinking about sort of Palm Beach, Miami, Tennessee, Texas as other places that have their eyes open and are putting up billboards in Manhattan saying, "Why are you paying state income taxes?" That's out there too. And I think Mamdani, young as he is, I think he has political instincts that are to be taken seriously, and he's not going to be in a hurry to blow all that up. When you see when the favorite meme is that Florida's best realtor of the year is Mamdani because he creates the situations for people to move, I think that's a real thing. And that just to sort of round out the monologue slightly, I think Mamdani's going to learn real quick how things get funded or not funded, and to drive out maybe not the billionaires, they're going to be mobile whether no matter what happens, but to drive out the millionaires, the income earning class, not the asset owning class. He really sets himself up for a problem, and that ultimately that affects things statewide, which then gets back to his ability to borrow via municipal bonds, et cetera. And those are a lot of very difficult lessons for a 33-year-old with limited legislative Albany experience to learn, but he's going to learn them real quick.
So, Frazer, you answered one of my questions, actually my biggest question already, which was, are we going to see an erosion of the tax base? And it sounds like the answer to that is maybe not right away, or there might be some in anticipation, right, of taxes later on.
Right.
About right?
I think sort of the instant case, and I think I've sort of anecdotally seen this, is that people who own gigantic properties in New York, and I think this is happening in London in advance of their tax regime changes, are going from, say, townhouse to two-bedroom apartment. And I think there's downsizing to that as a way to stage an ultimate exit once kids are out of schools and all the different life stages that happen to for people who ultimately think they're going to be bail out of New York eventually. This is acting as a way to sort of begin your phase out on that front and then to eventually move. Now, I would argue you're probably 6 months too late, and that some of the hysteria is already baked in, and to get somebody to come in and buy your $18 million townhouse is going to be somewhat tricky. But at the same time, I think that the tax base erosion in general, I think that is I don't think that's a near term thing. I think people who are in hysterics and jumping up and leaving, they were going to do that anyway. But I think if you start getting some conditions that make capital formation and business development and being able to earn, create headwinds with that vis-a-vis crime, vis-a-vis ability to do business, vis-a-vis being able to develop properties, that type of thing, then I think you start seeing the slow gears start to turn. And if you add onto that sort of the political window dressing of tax rates going up, then I think you might see some acceleration there.
So I think one of the key questions we wanted to talk about in this broadcast is, essentially, are we sliding a little bit in the socialist direction, away from sort of a more pure capitalist approach? And the reason we pose that question is not just because of the left, the rise of Mamdani and AOC and Bernie, but also because you have some, within the administration, the president's administration, Trump's administration, you have a move towards ownership of various, strategic companies, like in rare earths and semiconductors, uh, minority stakes. You've got government, the Trump administration trying to manage a deal with TikTok.
Right.
So, the question is, are we moving in the direction of state ownership of the economy, or let's call it mixed? There's a phrase, mixed ownership of the economy, away from something that's more private sector focused because of political developments on either side.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I'd call it sort of a secular trend versus maybe a more tactical trend. I think I would divide the two initiatives into two different types of government intervention. I would say the first one related to socialism and sort of having command and control from the government on down with certain things. I am more sanguine on that notion. I think the way I would describe it maybe differently is that we are going into a protectionist slash cronyist type of environment at the federal level. I think Trump's personality and his, everything from tariffs to ownership of things like Intel to, soybeans, sort of correcting a misstep there because he, sort of looks at the political wins and that didn't work. I think we're in that vein a little bit more than sort of the socialist vein, because he's certainly not sort of staffing the federal government with experts to be able to have a command and control type of impact on the overall environment. Trump, by virtue of being a real estate developer, is deal to deal. He's week to week, not even quarter to quarter at this point. And so to say that we're going toward like a China 5-year plan environment, I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
But I do think, there are winners and losers, and, that's as quickly as you donate to the new East Wing or, buy the latest crypto offering. And I think the cronyist slash protectionist, depending on, how much you believe in what's going on, that's where we are at the federal level.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up cronyist because it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember back when Putin came into power, around the turn of the century, 2000, this turn of this century, right?
Right.
Where when he came into power, basically he called in all the oligarchs and he said, look, I'm going to let you guys make a lot of money. In fact, I'm going to give away state assets and let you guys make a lot of money as long as you don't criticize me or as long as I can count on you to do my bidding. And that sounds pretty much exactly what Trump's doing with U.S. oligarchs, especially in the tech sector. Sounds exactly the same.
Just to add on to that, I mean, the framework I use to analyze Trump to the extent anybody can, number one, it's to just sort of understand that, he's a disciple of Roy Cohn, and that has its own weirdness to it. But I view success in this country usually along three principles. Number one is currency, the other one is votes, and then finally ratings. I would give Trump in general middling marks on the dollars and votes part, believe it or not, even though politically, there's lots of evidence to say, you don't know what you're talking about, Frazer, but he is a once in 250-year genius in terms of ratings, and all of his success comes from that. And ultimately, I think that's how he's running this country and running the economy, and it just sort of results, contracts, commitments, they don't matter. They're all negotiable all the time with him. And, against that backdrop, it's very difficult to plan for. It's very difficult to budget for. It's very difficult to sort of, look around corners and try to understand, what you can count on, what you can't count on. But ultimately, if you play into the ratings game, I think that's the metric that he understands best. And if you operate in that world, hopefully for your sake, the votes and the dollars follow. But as we were talking about before we started recording, I think we're in sort of like this Berlusconi postmodern environment with U.S. politics. And so, if you can recover from certain things by just getting past the news cycle as fast as possible, that's in many ways how the economy is being run.
Yeah, Berlusconi. That's
One
a
thing
good
that just
example.
jumped out at me in terms of this is the similarity between, the Hillary and Trump first election. And I look at it and I say, boy, you know what I mean? It wasn't him winning as much as it was her really doing a poor job in terms of how she attracted different voting groups and how she listened to what was happening on the internet with fundraising and other things. And I look at this situation and I'm sitting there saying, is this what the Democrats are going to present as their solution, to pick a candidate who's got all the sexual innuendo and all the problems in his background? You'd say almost like the Democrats wanted to present a Trump-like candidate to see if they could win. And I don't know what the test was, and I don't know why it wasn't more important to them, but they seem like, if everybody wants to characterize, and I'm sure that Trump is going to win from having Mamdani, because basically you're just saying, hey, we went as far left as we could go, and we are away from the norm, and therefore that's where, the Democratic Party is going.
Look, I think the Democratic Party has a real, I don't know if I'd call it crisis, but they have a real idea issue. And, while a lot of Republicans way back when you had sort of let's call it the fiscal conservatives, socially liberal types, and then it sort of morphed into the hard right. And then when Bush the second kind of opened up the spigot from a spending perspective, then the root system of fiscal conservatives kind of went away with the Republican Party, and you were left with the social conservative components of it as a way to hold your base. I mean, I think the Democrats are kind of facing that right now. The tent is so wide open. The issue, the being everything to everybody all at once component of the party is such that they don't at the moment stand for anything. And I think that allows, let's call it, experiments at the local level. And I would call Mamdani's win an experiment in democratic principles. I think the Democrats look at that and say, oh my gosh, I mean, there's a reason why Obama didn't endorse him. There's a reason why Hakeem Jeffries didn't jump out and endorse him. It's because they aren't sure that and there's lots of precedent to say this is the case. They're not sure that New York City is the rest of the country, and their jobs in many ways are to sort of preside over the party and to make sure that they're relevant nationwide and that they present an interesting alternative to whatever candidacy the Republicans put forward, assuming it's Vance at the moment, but Trump, they say he's going to try to do it. I find that constitutionally dubious, if not necessarily clear. But the Democratic Party is in a period of experimentation right now, and I mean, I think they have to feel heartened that the sugar high of the last election with Trump seems to be off, and that the numbers are such that at least in New York and Virginia, and it looks like California is going to win with their redistricting plan, and New Jersey, that there are some successes there that they can build off of, and that's something that points to a better midterm outcome than they may have had before. But I think the long-term component is that until they have, for lack of better words, like a contract with America that Gingrich came up with, or a somebody who embodies a broad stroke of people and is able to articulate and get people excited and so on. Newsom, AOC, Rahm Emanuel, I've heard that name pop back up, and those are people who sense the vacuum and want it. But whether they are the solution to the Democratic problems on that side, I don't know about that. But that's what the Democrats are wrestling with. I think the ideas component of it has just gotten so mashed up that the experimentation at the local level, they're going to be kicking at things until they grasp onto some ideas. And it's something they have to grasp onto very quickly because these midterms are vital for them going forward. I mean, I'm kind of I like divided government. So well, the traditional Republican in me sort of says, oh, I don't know if I want this, but the idea of having a House controlled by the Democrats to offset what's going on with the rest of the federal level is appealing to me in terms of sort of laying out some accountability, whether learned or not. But by the same token, I think that I wouldn't assume it's there, and that either turbocharged gerrymandering efforts or others that don't protect that Republican majority, and then you have another 2 years of essentially the same type of government that we're feeling right now.
We'll be right back.
We hope you're enjoying our episodes. If you are, then we'd greatly appreciate your liking, following, and sharing. Help us help others. Now let's get back to the discussion.
Yeah, it just feels to me like if you were the king of the Democratic Party and you said, would be really good for us to win back New Yorkers and win back the idea that Democrats can coexist and thrive in endorsing the markets and endorsing the industry of finance. Right now it seems like if I were Jamie Dimon opening up a $59 million headquarters in New York City, I gotta think it's it's not the place he once wanted it to be 2 years ago or 3 years ago when he started building this campus.
Yeah, no question. I think, look, I mean, they don't have buyers or bores. I mean, this has been a 15-year plan of his essentially to get that skyscraper up. And he actually, COVID was the biggest favor to him ever because he had a bunch of empty streets. He could take down the old building very quickly. But yeah, I think he looks at New York and says, look, what are we doing here? I need to be able to staff this thing, and I need to be able to have the best and brightest come here. And I need for the capital markets, the international capital markets, to look at New York and be that beacon on a hill, to borrow some political phrasing from way back, so that we are the ones that are attracting the capital, and we're the ones that are advising on it so that we can drive our revenues. But it's no secret that, Dallas has got more employees than New York does for JP Morgan. And, I think that,
do you think this promotes the Texas becoming the new marketplace?
It's already happening.
Yeah, I know it's happening, but it feels like to me this is going to be an accelerator for the relocation of markets to Texas.
I don't take it as fait accompli that Texas is where everything shows up, or that Miami, or I think it will just diffuse according to the particular, let's call it, regional needs of these different institutions. I don't think you need to run a wealth management firm out of New York to be particularly competitive to a national client base, for instance. But I do think, the investment banking world probably needs to center around New York in order to deal with worldwide interests, whether you're London or Kyrgyzstan or wherever, they got to come to New York to do it. You can't have that run out of Nashville. But the diffusion,
the regulations and the ideas of Texas. I mean, I really do think they have a point about how do we access capital and how do we get things, started and incorporating in Texas for a lot of oil companies and a lot of other companies is now making, I think that Austin has become a chip headquarters. And I think that there is a technology side to this that I think people are missing. And my only thing is, I went to school in New York. I love New York. I think it's a great city. I think the arts and the things there. But if you keep making mistakes, I guess I would say, how do we know that somebody couldn't, I don't know how you turn and make New York more favorable when you're going to have a government that is going to be almost, the opposite in terms of how they're going to treat the average citizen and who they're going to be. I mean, the affordable housing isn't going to help Wall Street.
Well, look, I mean, I think that, if you're a business thinking about locating in New York, I think you have to sort of understand the costs of doing business here. Everyone already kind of does already and say, it's probably going to go up. Can I house my people? Can they be close by? Greenwich is a hedge fund haven for a reason. And, New Jersey is where pharma ultimately went for reasons. And people migrate down to Florida and Texas. And manufacturing hasn't been a significant thing in sort of the New York City area in a very long time for all these different reasons that we're talking about. The important thing for New York, I think, and this was really a great legacy of Bloomberg, was the positioning or sidestepping over to tech and the Googles and et cetera, and attracting them as Wall Street 2.0 in many ways. And so, if I were really worried about New York, and I am because I live here and I want it to be good, and I don't want my taxes to go up any more than they have to, and all that stuff. Like if I start seeing tech companies wander away because it's just not what it needs to be in service of them, apart from what they do on the left coast, then that's when you start saying, okay, something really significant is here. Because we are now, I mean, New York is sort of pressing the, retreating from work from home and get back to the office and all that stuff. If the tech companies are sort of the major manifestation of that, and Wall Street is going to fall in line very quickly. If the tech underpinning of Wall Street's economy weakens, that's a disaster, because that is the next 50 years. That is the next 100 years. I mean, it's, Wyoming is the crypto state, and Texas is oil and gas, and Florida is whatever it is besides tourism. But New York is the financial capital of the world, and finance is tech at this point. And so if that weakens, then the diffusion, I think, accelerates, and the critical mass that sort of powers the city and the state in terms of business, that's when you start seeing, the light bulb flicker, and that's not great.
So Frazer, I would characterize Mamdani as, in large part, a reaction to Trump. That's how I would characterize it. I mean, there are other specific New York elements to it, but I think he's more or less a reaction to Trump. The question then becomes, what'll happen? What will Mamdani's election trigger in terms of future opposition to him? I mean, where are we going to go next? What's going to be the trend in New York? There's not going to be a second Mamdani, I don't think, right? I mean, what follows Mamdani?
Well, let's go back to how New York is funded. And it's funded at the New York City level. That drives most of the tax revenue. And then, the funding decisions around New York really happen at the state level. If you see an issue with Mamdani where crime goes up, the standard of living goes down, he doesn't come through on affordability, that type of thing. The Republican Party is so weak in New York City at this point that the opposition will come from within the Democratic Party, and they'll, that centrist person, whomever that is, if they make any sort of pro-business gestures, or are able to deliver some sort of achievement around increasing housing and the different components on that front, then I think that's where it's going to happen. But all of which is to say that if you come out on the backside of it and Mamdani somehow his policies quote unquote work, which I don't think they will, but let's say that there are successes that he can point to. The world, the way the world is set up, it's just not with ranked choice voting and those types of things. You have to really split hairs in order to distinguish yourself from the current incumbent candidate. And I think once he learns how to raise real money for things that are larger than the current election, and he starts getting used to getting driven around New York and things like that, I suspect there's going to be a bit of a softening. And then, the world of compromise is going to, the job of mayor of New York is the toughest political job in the country, including president of the United States. He is in front of people with severe opinions and real issues all the time. there just aren't enough buffers for that, and that wears on you. And so I think there's going to be a bit of a softening of his stances in order to try to get things done. Is that good or bad for New York? I'm not sure.
The thing that I find very intriguing is the connection between the Mamdani and the de Blasio. I mean, are they really different, or are they kind of just a 2.0 of the same idea that we need to give more, we need to do more, we need to help more of the people in the city? And he was able to somehow generate the idea that he was the solution. And I think Mamdani kind of stepped in his shoes and moved it even a little bit further to the left. But I guess I'd wonder, is there anything in his record or in his candidacy that you say, you know, he may be a little bit left on this and this, but he's right on in terms of how he's talking to voters and how he's trying to get them to see a different city? Because I think New York survived de Blasio, who I thought was perhaps one of the worst mayors ever, but maybe, maybe there's something there that, I'm missing.
I'm missing it too. From a pure substance portion of his message, it's sort of, 5 co-op grocery stores and free buses and universal this or that and tax hikes on billionaires. That's kind of that's his agenda. And then other than that, I want more housing and it's going to be union built and all that. That's it.
Why do so many people fall for that kind of, like, if we have an intelligent electorate, what would lead them to go past the simple question about, well, how are we going to pay for it?
So first of all, people don't care how that gets paid for. I think they just sort of assume that it magically happens. And, the New York City doesn't print money. It borrows money at the behest of the people who are willing to lend it to them. But they're not in charge of the dollar, and it just doesn't magically appear. And that's where you get back into sort of beam days, and Ford goes to city, drop dead, we're not guaranteeing your payment. That's ultimately what happens if you really turn the dial all the way to the wrong way and you overspend to the point that it's not supported by any revenue, because states have to balance their budgets, cities do too, et cetera. I think, look, he's young and untested, without much accomplishment sort of surrounding him. And so without that, there's not much to really parse through and criticize. And so you wrap that up into a charismatic package, the right person for the right moment. And people are really overstating what I think the zeitgeist is doing. But if people are willing to give him a chance as sort of retribution against what's happening at the federal level, then that's part of the emotion that people are sort of taking with it from when they go to the ballot box.
So you mentioned borrowing, which raises an interesting question. Actually, 2 related questions. One is, would Mamdani actually be able to control how much is borrowed, or is the comptroller of New York sort of more independent?
I think the controller has more independence over that. Because absent that, then Mayor Adams would he would have borrowed everything in order to, and you would have the giveaways would be infinite if there was control at the mayor level.
And then the second question I have about same general issue is, how much buffer does he have before the rating agencies start really downgrading big time New York City?
So I think that I give him a year on that front, because I think that the budgets are strained currently, and that happens if he starts spending willy-nilly on a variety of different giveaways, and he's able to extract that at the state level from Hochul, then I think he's got some buffer to work with. But I think that leash is real short, and the Hochul needs to get reelected in 2026. She's in no hurry to raise taxes at the city level, where she needs she's not from New York City. She's from Buffalo, and she's an outsider in that environment. And so she can't be, sort of raising taxes in order to pay for things that don't really help her very much. They're better for Mamdani's political benefit. That to me is the real that's the real go-between there. As far as rating agencies, ultimately they're going to look and say, look, if you're spending 125 billion and you're only taking in 110, that's not great. And if you persist in that over a couple of cycles, then that's really not great. Ultimately, I think the three of us would agree the pen hits the paper when they miss a payment. And
Right.
I think there are a lot of vested interests, not only Mamdani, but Hochul and lots of other people who just can't have that happen. And that message will get back to Mamdani saying, look, this is great and all, but if you do this, you're not going to be mayor for much longer.
So is there going to be, now I know that there's been some talk of New York State redistricting of congressional districts.
Yep.
I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, they can't do it before 26. Or maybe they can if they found a way to do it. But I was thinking more specifically about Staten Island. I heard something about some effort to try to make Staten Island more democratic.
Sure. So the redistricting animal rises up all the time. There was one plan that got struck down by the courts for being overly tailored. And so, nationally speaking, when you hear about Republicans redistricting Texas to get more seats, they say, well, what about New York? They did it too, so much so that the neutral court said this was crazy. So that constantly happens. And so if you look at the way the lines are drawn, they're just the gerrymandering. That really is, if I were to sort of say one thing that scares me the most about the future of this country, it's the prevalence of the gerrymandering to sort of cement in vested interests for a very long period of time. I think at the moment, Staten Island, they may try to stick some, take part of Brooklyn and, wedge that in there and make that part of the voting component. But I'm in the very short term, I don't think that's going to be a huge deal. I think there will be some gestures to try to, eke out another district or two at the Democratic level within the state. The larger question is that New York State actually has been losing Congress people over the last 10 to 20 years as they flee, in theory, to go to Florida and warmer states, or the growth doesn't catch up or what have you. That to me is a larger issue. And then it's sort of, for a different podcast, maybe it's sort of the idea of, how New York City versus the rest of New York State, and how does that align with it? Is it really two different states in terms of what they need from the federal government at all? We could go, that doesn't hit the capitalism part too closely.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on one question regarding the debt and the subway. I mean, is there a path forward that doesn't really decimate the balance sheet of New York City? I mean, how is the subway treated? Is that separate debt from the city debt? Or
yes, so the MTA, which is jointly controlled by New York, New Jersey, is that's what pays for the subway and the transportation infrastructure and those types of things. The congestion pricing was the way to fill the gaps on that. That, I guess, is going to continue. I mean, Trump comes in and says, "Oh, I'm going to outlaw it," or whatever. I really don't think that's going to happen, but I've been wrong before. For things like capital projects and general maintenance and so on, the money has to come from somewhere. And the idea that congestion pricing, people who are driving cars, et cetera, help to fund that, I could envision an expansion of congestion pricing to try to, sort of improve the subways and the other parts of the infrastructure that are important.
It just seems funny to me to not say free transportation, you say free buses. And I don't know why the subway isn't I never liked using the buses because there was too much above ground traffic, but maybe New York's a different place now. But
The free buses, I mean, I take the
isn't
bus.
that an MTA thing?
Yep. And so, that's it's really going to end up being kind of a moving of shells. In order to pay for one thing, you're going to have to take from something else. And keep in mind too, capital projects, I don't know if this is the right number, but it seems like it costs 2x to 3x more to do anything in New York versus anywhere else. And so, to do anything to actually improve situations is extremely expensive. And the actual cost of upgrading things and sort of taking a switching system that is turn of the century and making it modern to be one way to sort of improve things. And by turn of the century, I mean 1900, not 2000. It's just a real problem. And so where does the money come from when you're dealing with billions and billions and billions and billions
I'm
of
just saying,
dollars?
if you're coming out of the same MTA and you're going to take less income, it feels like your capital projects are going to be less capable. You're going to be less able to achieve them unless you come up with some new revenue source. And I don't think that the people in New York feel like they, want to become another revenue sourse.
Well, and that underscores, I mean, again, that is sort of a death by a thousand cuts problem where you're not going to see these things sort of manifest themselves instantly. But if you take that in conjunction with a decline in standard of living manifested by crime, then that's when people say, do I really want to have my kids educated here? Or is it just easier to head off to Westchester County or Fairfield County or New Jersey or a different state to build my life? If I think that, in general, when people feel like the government is taking you for granted, that's when you're in deep trouble if you're an elected official. And, Mamdani's going to have a little grace period on that, but not long, I don't think.
Okay, we got about 3 minutes left. Does everybody want to kind of make their, I believe that, Mamdani seems like a one term. I don't see it as a long term going to be good for the community to have somebody who wants to redistribute more money when there's so many fiscal problems with New York as it's currently constructed. So I think he's going to face real problems in the crime rate and real problems in the transportation updates he's trying to make. So I think he's going to make it a less livable place. And once they start to see some of that tax revenue leaving, as I know it's been leaving over the last 10 years, but I could see it definitely pick up as people just say, I want to go to a different place where I think it's more aligned with my values. What do you two guys think in summary about Mamdani and his long or short term?
Well, I would agree with you, Steve. I think it's one term. I also have a fear that, Trump is going to use him as the symbol of the Democratic Party in general.
Correct.
And the Democrats, what they have to do is they have to leverage all the other things that they achieved yesterday. When you take Mamdani out of the equation, really yesterday was a victory, not just for Democrats, but for, I would say, independents as well. So, I mean, basically for anybody who's not MAGA, I think yesterday was a big victory. It's just that the Mamdani thing is sort of the downside of that, because he could use that. He and MAGA could use that to paint, all Democrats with a brush.
I think those are two heavily Democratic states, though. So I don't know if I could declare a big victory because I think those states didn't go for Trump and probably wouldn't have, right?
Well, what was interesting was that even in Georgia, I don't know if you saw in Georgia, there were three, I know this sounds kind of silly, public service commissioners, right? But I think, well, you would know better than I what a public service commissioner is, Steve. But my understanding is that they're pretty big officials at the local level, from what I heard. And three former Republican public service commissioner roles went to Democrats yesterday. And so I think that's, consider
That's more significant to me than the New Jersey government being Democratic.
which is why I bring it up.
I know, I like that. Frazer, do you have more comment on Mamdani's short-term, long-term?
It's really tough to say long term because you just don't know. But I think that as I said before, the thing I'm watching the most is who he ends up hiring as police commissioner. If Tisch sticks around, he gets 2 years on crime, I think. And then that lets him focus on other things. The other thing is, side note, is that 3 initiatives to sort of speed up rezoning for housing were passed yesterday in New York City. If I'm advising Mamdani, I would pour all of my efforts into housing rezoning. And to get as much built or as many shovels in the ground as possible so that he can point to some sort of win economically that is in line with his principles, which is to get more people housed as cheaply as possible. And if he's able to do that, then I think he gets even more bandwidth. And, if he came out of the mayor, if he came out 4 years from now and said, I was able to get 500,000 units built, he wins. Simple as that. I mean, that's one of the real unsolvables in New York City. And if he's able to articulate a solution to that, I think, it's a win for everybody. All that to say, I think the other big takeaway is that the imagery that a Trump-led sort of MAGA effort made huge inroads into a variety of different minority groups as a voting bloc, I think is an illusion, or certainly more muted than was sort of declared at the last election. And that is the part that I think will be interesting to watch going forward into the midterms. And if I have a prediction, which is usually a horrible idea because they're minor, go short it and run the other way. I do think the Democrats win the House by like 1 vote or, 1 seat. And then the final 2 years of Trump are quite a bit different because every step is going to be challenged, and it's going to take 4 times as much energy for him to do what he's been trying to do recently.
Thank you, Frazer. This has been a great call. I'm glad you could
Thanks,
join
Frazer.
us.
Always great to talk to you.
No, this is a treat. I love doing it, and I hope I pass the audition for the next one.
Yes, you're always on the calendar every 6 months, and we really appreciate you, Frazer, and we look forward to some of your things and coming back and talking again about New York City because it is key to the financial services in the United States. So thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoy this, and please listen for more podcasts. Thank you.
The views shared on this podcast represent the personal investment views of the hosts. They are for educational purposes and not meant to be taken as investment advice. Listeners should consult their own investment, legal, and tax advisors. Past performance of any investments is not a guarantee for future return.